Jason Watkins.
Hello.
Thank you very much for coming.
Pleasure. Nice to meet you.
Well, it's brilliant because I didn't realise you were here. We're in Bristol, and I didn't realise you were here until quite recently. So I then got on the case. But you're here to film Trolleyed, which is now in its second series.
Yeah.
How's it going?
It's going very well.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's our second series. The first one came out on Sky last year and just did very well. I think it's the biggest kind of reaction launch for a non-network show. So for a satellite show, it was the biggest opening of any kind of, certainly comedy.
Yeah.
So on the back of that, we got this big commission of doing 28 episodes. So we've got this series, the second series, which we're filming now, and then we're doing a Christmas special, and then the third series. So yeah.
Right. So that was all commissioned sort of as one.
In one hit.
Right.
Yeah.
After the initial 6, and they went down well.
I think we did 8 originally, yeah, and then it did well, and so we, I think Rough Cut, the production company, Asher Taylor, who was behind the office, and he boldly said to Sky, "Can we do a lot more?" And they said yes, which is great.
So it's Asher and he's producing, is he?
He's producing, yeah, it's his company that produces it for Sky, so they're the production company.
Brilliant. Yes, yeah. I mean, I think it's it's a bold move of Sky and really brave, and to invest in comedy like they are now. You know, because you were saying about the set and how big it is and how.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds quite, I mean, it's a very impressive set. I mean, it is enormous. Like, I mean, I'm going to, all for England now, but it is like a massive supermarket with like 10 aisles.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's a kind of feat in itself to have built a supermarket in an old bottle yard, a kind of hangar. But what it does is that it enables the place to look real.
Absolutely, and it needs that, doesn't it? You know, you can't be fobbed off with a sort of fake-looking.
It kind of anchors it, and I think in the past it used to be, anything set in a supermarket, each brand had to be that particular supermarket's brand. So nowadays the kind of laws about what you can show are much more relaxed. As long as you don't feature, Kellogg's cornflakes in front of an actor's face, although sometimes that probably be a better thing. So it looks good. So you've got all the shelves all stacked out and normal, completely recognisable.
Absolutely, yeah, and totally, and it needs a big initial investment by Sky to say that we believe in this enough to do it. So that's really good. So you're here for a good few months, are you, or?
We're here for, I'm here till March. So where are we now? We're now, I don't even know what month it is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And
so July right through to March.
Right. So
we've already done like 2 months.
Okay. Right. So I mean, how long does it take to kind of, if you've got one episode, how long are you looking at for that? Is it
about a week and a bit?
Jeez. Right. Okay.
It works out about a week. Yeah. You shoot blocks, so you shoot like 4 episodes in a block. Okay. So you do like roughly 3 blocks. Mm-hmm. So you're doing episode 1, 2, and 3, 4 at the same time. So you're bouncing around episodes on a single day, for example.
Right. Okay.
And then that carries on through. So.
Right. So at least there's a little bit of continuity in terms of you're working on 4 episodes at the same time.
Yeah.
That you're not bouncing between sort of however many.
13. Yeah.
Well, exactly. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. But it's good. I mean, working on a sitcom, sort of a lot of your stuff is more comedy, I guess. Recently, that I've seen you in, is that something that that you're drawn to, or you're approached to be in, or?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I started out doing all sorts of stuff. I started as a kind of did small scale touring. I did like fringe work. I did the old rep system, touring in the theatre. I did loads of that. And a lot of that was comedy based. It's sort of comedy acting, not stand up or just funny characters in comedies. Mm-hmm. And then I did more stuff like in the West End and picked up the odd telly, and they also tended to be comedies as well. But also at the same time I had sort of straight stuff going on. I did a lot of stuff at the Royal Court Theatre in London, which was quite straight, I suppose. And so, in terms of telly, it's been a kind of mix. But they tend to be sort of the character parts and kind of funny parts.
I mean, in terms of theatre, was the last thing that you did, was it Our Class at the National? Or a few...
I did another, I did Our Class, and then I did a play at the Hampstead Theatre.
Okay.
Which is quite near me. It's not far from where I live, and it's kind of fitted in between this job. So.
Right, okay, so you keep that kind of alive alongside the TV stuff.
I think most actors say that, because it's just kind of pure acting. I mean, acting on television has its a different discipline. Particularly comedy, I think, is a sort of, for me it is anyway, it's a different discipline.
It's got subtleties, I suppose, that on-stage acting isn't. But I remember sometimes talking to people who are used to doing stage acting or used to stand-up comedy, and they have to tone it down somewhat. Is it sort of difficult to transition between them? But
well, I mean, Gielgud, wasn't he? He's, the great actor Gielgud. He said that you didn't really know necessarily. You need to know what you were doing. You needed to know what you were in. So once you recognise what you're in, what type of thing it is, what the genre is, and what's required, then that kind of guides you. And that's very much the same with trolling, for example. Because you can be quite big in it, I think. Sometimes you can underplay it, throw stuff away, but also it's quite comic, and there's a sort of slapstick element to Gavin and some of the other characters.
Well, exactly, because it's very much character based, so you can, and if you are a big character, you can express that quite a lot, I suppose. Yes, and Gavin is a character that you're kind of. Do you say that you're quite drawn to him? You're quite you relate to him quite well.
Well,
because he's a professional and he's.
Yeah, and I'm deeply professional in everything I do, and he's quite anal, I suppose, and I can be occasionally. I like stationery. Like Gavin, I do like stationery. So I'm saying now on national television. So I'm a bit like that. But I just like him because he's a rounded character, and he's like a lot of people. He's trying to do his best, and he's got a very good heart. And I think a lot of the characters have a good heart, and they're watchable. And there's not. I like it 'cause there's not too much cruelty in it. I mean, no one's getting the piss taken out of them. And I think that I like that about this comedy. I like that about comedy in general. I like characters to be funny and to be real, and I suppose in a strange way kind of celebrated at the same time. Without you never play that working.
But you're not such a fan of the cruelty behind.
Well, I mean, it's such a funny thing because cruelty is very funny. Slapstick is very cruel in itself, but I think it's. I'm very much on the side of comedy, and particularly in the last few years, where you're not taking the piss out of anybody.
And I think it is sort of taking prevalence more. There are a lot more comedies that are a little bit more like that, a little bit more family friendly, and a bit more humour comes from character rather than a bad situation.
I mean, comedy always comes out of a bizarre situation, something strange, something kind of a clash of different characters' wants, and they want different things, and they butt up against each other. And that happens in sort of microcosm, little explosions all the way through, a butting of two different opposing attitudes, I suppose, and wants. I think, I don't know, some shows I really like and some I don't, and I think if you were to analyse it, I think for me, I like shows that have real, what I see to be recognisable people. And it's not necessarily a sort of sheen of writing. There's some wonderful writers out there. I suppose I get drawn to writers that write how people talk. I mean, and not just a kind of comic way of talking, but it's funny.
Right.
So for me, there's a big difference between those two things. And, that's not to say that some of those shows that are sort of writing based aren't good. I mean, they're great, but for me, I just like real characters.
It comes from a place of reality, that it's a believable thing rather than.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Yes, yeah. And so you did Psychoville, which is one of the main things that I knew.
And that's complete contradiction.
Well, yeah, no,
this is completely bizarre characters that aren't recognisable at all.
No, absolutely.
But they are.
But I was kind of thinking, because you've done Trolleys and you've done Psychoville, and I remember seeing you in things like Vivian Vile, and then also you've got your actor thing. I think a lot of people know you from different perspectives.
Yeah.
I mean, do you find that? Do you find sort of you've got a very wide base of people that know about you?
I have. And I mean, from things like Being Human, playing that character was just such a dark, evil monster with a good sense of humour, as he saw it. Having that kind of character going on, and then playing Gavin, which is the opposite, completely opposite. And I suppose weirdly, character of Psychoville, Peter Bishop was somewhere in the middle of those two characters. And it is partly by design. That's what I like doing, but it's also because I've been lucky to be able to do them. So yeah. But I mean, things like Being Human, for example, it has a huge fan base anyway, of surprisingly different, types of people and ages, and so I'll get stopped or whatever, people of different, young people or middle-aged men like myself. So there's a real mix. But yes, there are. I mean, somebody said that they saw me in a thing called Conviction, which was something I did about 7 years ago, and a thing called Bostock's Cup, which is a mockumentary about a football team, an amateur football team that gets to the FA Cup final and wins it, with Neil Pearson and Ralph Little when I think it was almost his first job, and there's lots of other, Tim Healy. It's a really funny piece actually, well worth a look, Bostock's Cup. And I think there was a film called, I can't remember, it was a football film.
Yeah.
I can't remember, it was good, but it came out a couple of years later, and a few things have been nicked from Bostock's Cup.
Oh, really?
But yeah, anyway.
Yes.
Plagiarism is flattering.
Well, that's what they say, at least, isn't it? Yeah. No, but I mean, I suppose because you've been involved in lots of different things, and you do kind of seem jumping around from different. It's maybe quite nice to get your teeth into a role like Jason,
Gavin, yeah.
Gavin, even.
The edges aren't blurred for me. I know exactly why. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, but to get your teeth into a proper character, and for a prolonged period as well. And I suppose it's helpful that you do like him, because you've got to spend so much time as him. Yeah. Until next March.
Yeah, we do get a couple of breaks, and we're doing the Christmas special, and then we get Christmas itself off. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, it is a long time to be the same character, and but it is good. I mean, the danger is that you just end up, all you do is play character, and I suppose in a long series like that, you can just end up doing something typical of your character, like some eccentricity or tick or something that you think is funny, or people find funny, like I say, Julie. I have to say Julie, and that seems to become a kind of, as Jane Horrocks' character is called Julie's my assistant, and so that came out of that pronunciation, that way of saying, it came out from my cousin who lives up in Stalybridge in Manchester. So, and I often think about him in that with that accent. So, but if you overplay it, it just becomes meaningless.
Yes.
And I think that's typical of, if you're playing a character for a long time, you've got to be active in the scene and play the scene. Otherwise, you just do a lot of funny acting, which won't sustain itself.
Mm-hmm. And also, I suppose when you're going for a more believable, it's not a character. In a way, it's a real person, and that's what you're trying to portray.
Yeah, it is, and that's why I often do a lot of theatre. Because sometimes when you're doing theatre, it's less complicated by the machine and mechanisms of television, which you have to just keep in mind. In theatre, it's quite pure, and you can just make decisions more easily. Whereas in television, there's different challenges. Like you know, doing it over and over again, and hitting a mark and things like that, and you know, consistency and stuff. So when you are in theatre, you can be creative and
do things more in the moment, and instead of having to keep.
Well, that's the trick, isn't it? You do it over and over again. You've got to keep it. You find ways of trying to keep it fresh. Listening to the old fellow actors and make sure that you're it's a way of just not trying to be too funny. I've spent the whole career trying not to be too funny, and it's kind of work. But you don't always go for the gag, I suppose.
Right.
Play somebody who's real, who is what he wants is ridiculous, and really believe it. I mean, it's interesting because, you know, Eric Sykes died yesterday. Great, and I was lucky. I worked with him in the West End about 10, 12 years ago, and I was very lucky to work with him. When you watched him, I mean, he was brilliant, really, because there was no real sort of, I didn't think, any kind of comic timing. There wasn't any sort of system of doing it, like wait a couple of beats, deliver, you know, set up, feed line, punchline. There wasn't anything like that. It was just, he was a funny man in himself, in his bones, but he was just kind of, he believed completely in his character and believed completely in the situation, the scene he was in. So that's all you have to do.
Right. Yes.
That's all you have to do.
Yeah,
you really believe in what your character is doing and why he's there, and you really believe that you're in a supermarket and you're in a room with somebody who, you know, is worried about the difference between the two types of tomato, and you've got to sort it out. And if you're serious and engaged about it, it's funny.
If that's real for you.
It's real, and that was the same. That was what Eric was so brilliant at. Sometimes he'd do it differently every night. You know, timings would be different, but you could see his mind was alive. The thoughts were running through his head, and I mean, I remember he told me a story about Tommy Cooper. Who was he worked a lot with all these comics, and he wrote a lot for them. He wrote a lot for Norman Wisdom, and he wrote lots of stuff for other comics. But he said about Tommy Cooper, you know, that one of his great kind of acts, or one of the great things he did was that he'd get introduced to Tommy Cooper, so the compere would come out, and here he is, Tommy Cooper, and then he wouldn't arrive, he just wouldn't come on stage,
right.
And he wouldn't come on, and he'd just in the wings, and the audience would sort of laugh because he wasn't coming on, and then it would go on again, and then they'd laugh a bit more, and then obviously it was for about 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and it would go on for minutes. By the time, you know, he came on, eventually, the audience were falling about crying because they knew who was in the wings. They knew who they was going to come out.
Yeah.
But there are no rules sometimes. Even in that, what you would imagine would be a conventional old comics kind of routine. There is a kind of anarchy to it, and a difference. It's not a formula. And I think Eric was, you know, although you call him conventional of that time, perhaps he had a kind of anarchy and freshness, and that's what we try and do. Yes.
So changing things is something. Doing things in a different way is that a good way of
it is
things?
Trying to keep it fresh. And I mean, sometimes you know, Gavin's got a lot of technical things to say about products. Sometimes you'll just come on the gauge and think, right, I've got to get ketchup and pickles out in the right order. But other times, you know, you are trying to find the comedy and you're trying very much to find the comedy in it. Mm-hmm. You know, trying to find the contrast.
You're trying to find the funny thing for you.
Trying to find the funny thing in the scene. You know, what is it? What is this? What's the writer meant by writing these? You know, it's not just me being such a funny and being Gavin. There's a reason for it. You have to try and make sure you do that.
And it's paying respect to the writing and staying true to what was written for you.
Yes, and the writers are brilliant. So
yes, do you work closely with the writers when you're kind of?
Not necessarily. You know, they go in a hole, write these things and emerge. And we go through a process of changing things, which is not necessarily in our control. because executives and script editors and producers have an overview, which actors don't. I think there's a danger if you get too active in how you see your character and where he's going, then you can do as what I talked about earlier on about you just compounding a character and not keeping it alive and being allowed for it to be him to be shifted around, or to be shifted about. So it's only really on the day when you think, so that doesn't work, that line, can we change it to this, can we just do that? But it's quite minor really.
So, in terms of the whole piece, Trolly, because it was a one series thing, does it kind of does the story progress a lot? I mean, I know you probably can't say too much.
Yeah.
But does it take turns that perhaps even you weren't expecting when you saw where they were going with it next?
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, we have got a new character who's come in. Well, we've got 3 new permanent characters, and we had a character who came in. With my character, he was promoted at the end of the last series.
Right.
So I'm area manager, and in comes a new manager played by Stephanie Beecham.
Right. Okay.
Which is a very sort of crazy choice in many ways. She's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And she comes in like this pile driver and asserts herself in a very kind of destructive way, which does 2 things. It kind of gives the series another input, and it helps those characters pull together against this sort of evil force, and then it unravels her kind of, can I say, her dynasty at the top kind of unravels.
Right, yes. I suppose with a second series you do have to introduce another element like that to give it kind of an extra flavour and a bit.
Yeah, and characters, character relationships come in and out. I mean, Julie and Gavin, Jane Horrocks and myself, that goes on a bit of a journey, and Carl Rice and Beverly Rudd, who played Lisa, and I can't remember his name now, and I'm the manager. But Colin and Lisa, they have a nice little journey as well. So
right.
That's the great beauty in the series. That you kind of shift and take. If you've got a long arc of a series, you can do lots of different. Take a characters through an emotional journey.
You can have more going on. Yes, exactly. And the thing is, I think because it's so character based, in terms of it's important that it's in a supermarket, but it's almost because they just happen to be in that place, and it's the interactions that happen there.
Yeah, again, they're kind of recognisable things that we all experience in the workplace, or at the university or whatever. Those kind of things swim within the comedy of the piece.
Now, in terms of your next sort of projects, is the next big thing that, well, at least I know about, is you're doing a second nativity?
Yeah, no, that's done. That's in the can. That's coming out at Christmas. Yeah.
So that's coming out this Christmas. So you filmed that last year, was it? Or
we filmed it last year. I finished here last year, and I did Dirt Gently and Nativity 2 at the same time. So I was over one. I did 6 journeys over 1 week. I was mad as well. I finished on with kids and animals, improvising, and then got in a car and came down here, and then woke up and did a few hours sleep and did Dirt Gently, and then backwards. It was like crazy. But it worked.
Yes,
so,
and rewarding, I guess. In retrospect, perhaps.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I mean Nativity. I mean I love. Nativity itself was a wonderful film, and it did very well at the box office, and it had a sort of checkered critical response. I mean, I think I read one review that wasn't very nice, and it kind of missed the whole point on because there are kids in it, and it's kind of a very innocent film and a very generous film, and it's about those of us who are lucky enough to have children and go through the nativity play thing. I mean, it's a huge. Watching your own child perform is a big thing, and for every parent, and it celebrates that kind of love and that and I think that's a wonderful thing. And it is genuinely funny as well. It's not weirdly not sentimental. You generally laugh a lot, and then you get very moved, and yet it hasn't got this schmaltz of, I don't think, of sentimentality plastered all over it. So Nativity 2 occupies the same ground. I haven't seen a rough cut of it, but it has that element to it which I love doing. So yeah, I'm high hopes for that.
I think it resonated particularly with parents who've been through that whole thing.
Yeah.
No, and I think it is difficult because critics will always perhaps leap upon projects like that, which maybe aren't hard hitting, but are just honestly funny and come from a good place.
I think so. I mean, there's like The In-Betweeners, which is a massive. I mean, it's so funny, brilliant, and all the boys, the whole team behind it is just great, and I really loved the series. But I thought the movie was a very the movie was great, but it was very different to Nativity. It was a completely different sort of thing. And I think if you're expecting something like The In-Betweeners, and you get Nativity, you can't sort of compare them in one way. They're a different sort of animal, and I think one or two critics, and they tend to be middle-aged men in dark rooms watching films day after day in a screening room in a studio in Soho. They're not people who go along to the cinema and feel the kind of joy and kind of laughter in a cinema, but which is what happened in Nativity, because it grew and grew and grew, got a massive audience, and then and DVD sales were big, and I often get stopped for that, and people say it's my children's favourite, it's our favourite film, and I can see why, because I love it.
And I think it's great when something like that does happen, that it's just embraced by the public, and it's sort of it speaks for itself. You don't need the critics to kind of cast their analytical eye all the time.
At all.
No, not. So now, are there any other? Any other things that you have planned afterwards, after this big marathon filming, or is it? Do you need time to kind of just relax a bit? And
I will need to have a break.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Some say it's very hard work acting, but it is and it is.
Yeah.
It's quite. You're up early and it's a long day, but I enjoy it and I've chosen to do it. So I do enjoy it, but I will be pretty knackered at the end. But I'll have a holiday, and then something has come up that I've been offered, and I may or may not do it. Partly because I just want to have a break, because then we come back straight in after the summer holidays.
Absolutely. Well, look forward to all. Particularly look forward to Trolley coming out and Nativity and everything. Thank you very much
Cheers.
for doing this.
Thank you.
And cheers. Thank you.